Hello everyone and welcome back to another Movie Nights movie review. Today we're going to be talking about Uproar. This film is directed by Paul Middleditch and Hamish Bennett. Forgive me if I pronounce those names wrong. And since this is a bit of an independent unknown film, I am going to read a bit of the synopsis. This is about a 17-year-old student who is forced to get off the fence he has actually sat on his whole life and stand up for himself and his future. In the lead role is Julian Dennison. You may recognize him from movies like The Hunt for the Wilderpeople and Deadpool 2. The film also stars Minnie, Rhys, Darby, Craig Hall, and countless others. I was fortunate enough to get to watch this movie, and I'm happy to say I was very pleasantly surprised by it. I didn't have a whole lot of expectations going into it. I'm unfamiliar with the filmmakers and their work, but I did recognize some of the people in the movie, and I thought I'm going to give this a shot. I'm going to watch this, and overall, I enjoyed it. It's not a perfect film by any stretch of the imagination, but a lot of the problems I have with the movie really come down to some budgetary restrictions as well as some repeated beats. Those are just the major things wrong with it. I think there's a couple little things, but overall, it's really heartwarming and it's a very uplifting movie, and I know a lot of people need that and like that. And on the positive note, I think all the performances in the film are very strong, particularly from Julian Dennison and Rhys Darby. Rhys Darby? I'm sorry if I say that wrong. The fucking werewolf from What We Do in the Shadows. When it's just the two of them on screen, their chemistry is great, and you really feel the camaraderie and the relationship build with these characters, especially through the eyes of this character. And this character has been going through this thing implied his whole life where he has certain wants and desires, but is constantly forced to do other things that he feels like he has to do. And this movie is set in the backdrop of apartheid going on in the 80s in South Africa, but the film actually takes place in New Zealand. And it kind of talks about how the controversy surrounding the New Zealand government with the apartheid in South Africa and the protests that were going in New Zealand at that time, especially around rugby. Rugby also has a big prominent part in the movie as well. The film also looks quite nice, especially for a lower budget film. It looks like they used a lot of real locations, and if they didn't, then they did a great job of building the sets and kind of disguising them as real locations. It felt very lived in. The humor in the movie works also. It does a great job of kind of tonally balancing the drama and the heart with the humor throughout the movie. There's also a great scene with Minnie and Julian Dennison as well that might be the best scene in the movie, and it's kind of just the emotional climax of both of them kind of unloading all of the repressed feelings that they were having in those moments. And not only just the performance, but the way that it was shot as well was very visually interesting. It was very emotionally resonant, and there are several scenes like that throughout the movie that work quite well. In regard to the negatives of the film, I mentioned earlier that there are repeated beats. I do feel like that the movie struggles to balance the wants and desires of the character and things he's forced to do, because there are things that you think like, oh, he's forced to do this, he doesn't really like this, but as the film plays on, you're like, oh wait, maybe he does enjoy this. It kind of felt forced in the beginning. Maybe it grew on him. Like, there are a couple things where you're kind of like, okay, like, I know what he likes to do, but I didn't think he'd like to do this, but now it's looking like he kind of does like to do this. But then there's also this. I'm being vague because I don't want to spoil the movie. It kind of bites off a bit more than I think it could chew. And another example of that, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video too, was there are some things that the small budget kind of hindered it on. And it's not the film's fault. They did the best they could with what they had. But there's a big protest scene in particular that you could tell was a bit hindered by the budget. They had to kind of shoot it and do it in a way with their resources. And you know, I know that kind of watching it just when I realize like, oh, okay, they're doing the best they can with what they have here. But a casual viewer might kind of see that and just be like, this doesn't quite fit the scale of what they're going for. And you kind of do feel that when you watch the movie. But those aside, I found myself really rooting for the lead character, wanting them to achieve their goals, see where their story was going to end up, and I was very interested in the arcs of the side characters as well, particularly the main character's brother, who has a very interesting story that kind of ties into the whole family dynamic. And so, you know, if you need a good, uplifting movie to watch, Uproar has come out. It is in some limited theaters, and I believe soon, I don't know when, but I believe soon it will be available for video-on-demand purchases, and I recommend that you seek this out. I quite enjoyed Uproar, and I hope you do as well. And when you watch it, please let me know in the comments what you think of the movie. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.